Now, when you start your firm, I think you mentioned to me at one time, there were other attorneys who were also young and eager. And I believe one of them that you came across in your early days was a man who's no longer with us any longer, but he got kind of well known for a time, named Johnny Cochran.
I loved Johnny Cochran.
And Johnny Cochran loved you. Now talk about how a young Tom Girardi and a young Johnny Cochran meet, and how does that happen?
Well, he was a couple years ahead of me in law school.
Yep.
And so we got to know each other and got to be friends. And then he was out there, he did a lot of criminal work. So then the civil cases, a lot of times he would say, gee, Tom, maybe we should work together on it and so forth.
You help me with this, I'll help you with that one.
Yeah, and he called me one day and he said, Tom, I'm have an all-white jury. My client is African-American. My doctor who testified is African-American. I'm as black as could be. Would you come down and kind of lighten up my cast a little bit? True story. Then, in the O.J. Simpson case, he finished that trial on a Friday. The jurors didn't start deliberating. They were going to start deliberating Monday morning. I talked to John, and I said, well, why don't we have lunch? So we had lunch at the Statler Hotel. Now it's the Hilton. And so he says, Tom, I won it. I said, Cochran, don't do this to me. A bunch of lawyers think they won the case and they lost. A bunch of lawyers thought they lost the case and they won. What are you talking about?
Yes.
Well, he said the jurors went in to get their coats out of the jury room. I'm sitting at counsel table, and then they walked out to leave, and 9 of them gave me a thumbs up. So anyway, that was, we had a lot of good times together, and he did an awful lot.
And could you tell even in the early days that Johnny Cochran was destined for great things?
Sure. The way he got along with people, the way he got along with the judges. I'm not saying judges aren't people. That's just another category.
Yeah, it's a different. But the point here is build good people skills, human relationships.
That's what we're involved with. As I tell my young lawyers here, being a good lawyer has nothing to do with knowing the law of Mapp versus Ohio. Mapp versus Ohio was a very famous case that all law students know about. Being a good lawyer has everything to do about decency, insight, caring, and so forth.
And human relationships, understanding. You've talked to your attorneys about the concept of mediation.
You know, for most people, you want to settle the case. You know, for this thing to go on for 3 years and so forth. For most people, if you can get the top dollar settlement, that's better. I mean, I love trying cases. I mean, I get a big bang out of it. It's really fun.
You get to be Perry Mason.
Exactly, right.
There you go.
And I do have a Paul Drake guy, too.
Okay, good.
But I think for the most part, what you strive to do as a lawyer is to try to get a good resolution to the case. Now, you don't want to give the thing away. If it's worth $100, baby, you better, okay, 90's fine, but not 40, you know. And so it's very important that, you know, you try to resolve these things, and the best way you have to resolve them, if that other side knows you have the ability to try the case.
And the willingness.
And the willingness.
Now, one of the most famous cases you've been involved in more famous cases than just about any attorney in the world, but I'm going to mention a name to you, and I'd like you to give us a little insight into it. Erin Brockovich.
That was really something. So the people up in Hinckley, they lived right next to the PG&E facility.
Yes.
And the generators were run at that facility on gas. But when the gas came in on the El Paso line from El Paso, Texas, to run the generators, it was too hot to put in the generators. So they would run the pipe up up a tower, and they would cascade water over the pipe, cool the gas, and then they would run the engines. But what would happen, the water would start eating the pipe away, rusting. So they decided they would add chromium, which is a rust inhibitor, to the water. So then
And
they
this
would...
is water they're drinking?
Well, what happened then is when they were through, the water would just be dumped onto the ground. It would permeate down, and the whole city was on well water. So they were now drinking. But the real, and although I got a lot of credit for winning that case, the true credit came from an expert. His name is Dr. Max Costa. He was at NYU. Because there were a lot of articles that talked about breathing chromium causes esophageal cancer, etc. They have all these welders, for example, that would have cancer from breathing the chromium on the welding stage. But there weren't any articles on drinking chromium. So I told Dr. Costa, I said, I think we're rotoed here. Well, he said, let's see. He went out and got 200 rats, fed half of them the Hinkley water, half of them regular water, and the ones on the Hinkley water, almost all of them got tumors. And that became an inroad that drinking chromium, how about that?
Wow.
Now, I got a bunch of credit for the win, but the truth of the matter is, I may as well lay it out. It was all Dr. Max Costa, baby.
But you found Dr. Max Costa.
That's true. I get some credit.
Some credit.
You know, the political arena has an awful lot to do with the legal arena. In other words, if they start coming down with laws that harm people who have been hurt and so forth, that becomes very difficult. And I think the one thing that lawyers have to keep in mind is that there's a very close connection with the laws that are made and how people are going to be treated. And you have, in our current administration, you have an awful lot of bills that are up for debate, which will really harm the people who've been hurt. The worst bill that ever came out was the bill 30 years ago that said if you're in a medical malpractice case, you can only get $250,000, no matter how badly hurt you are.
So there's a cap.
Right. And you could be a quadriplegic and can never walk again due to the doctor's negligence.
250.
Here's your 250, baby.
Heavily.
Now then, and how this came about, this was interesting, in the 30 years ago or so, they had raised the medical malpractice insurance rates to doctors, huge. And the doctors were picketing Sacramento. And so they came up with this bill, 250 is all you get. And I talked to Jerry Brown. I said, you can't sign this. This hurts the people that are most badly hurt. How can you sign a bill like this? He said, Tom, I've already talked to Rose Bird. She was the Supreme Court. It's unconstitutional, so let's just solve the problem. Lo and behold, that was 30 years ago. It's still with us.
You remain immersed in politics. You remain active, very active in this law firm. You also you were appointed to the Library of Congress.
Yes.
Now, how in the God's name did a kid who thought he didn't pass the bar for 2 hours get in the Library of Congress? Will you help me understand that better?
You know, one of the greatest things that's happened to me was being a trustee of the library.
The Library of Congress in America, the big deal, not joking.
So the president appoints two, the Senate appoints two, the House appoints two. And Harry Reid, who I knew in Nevada.
The senator, he was the majority leader.
Yes. And he said, Tom, I got a new job for you. I said, really, Senator, what is it? He said, you're going to like it. I said, what is it? He said, I'll tell you later. And anyway, he suggested my appointment that got approved by the Senate.
Jesus.
There is a little
To the
follow-up.
Library of Congress,
And this has been the stuff they have. You wouldn't believe it.
Well, tell me,
Here's a letter from Abraham Lincoln to his best friend, Mark. If slavery isn't wrong, then nothing is wrong. I just don't know if I'm the person that's supposed to do something about it. Abe. Here's Lincoln's Gettysburg Address written in his own hand in the stagecoach as he was headed to Gettysburg.
And do they constantly take in new material all the time?
There's more material than you can shake a stick at.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think that even if you have no interest in the law whatsoever, that our conversation today can have real, lasting, and significant impact on your life. I hope that you've enjoyed it half as much as I have. And Tom, thank you. You've been very generous.
You're so cool.